Hey guys, Sneaky Snake here, Brothers in Arms, World of Warships, and today's video we're going to take a look at a pretty good replay here in the Dmitry Donskoi, the Tier 9 Soviet heavy cruiser, and it's played by Jags_domain from the 1NJSE clan. I'm not sure what that means. I guess I could have figured it out, but whatever. He's playing some domination by himself, and it's on the map Sea of Fortune. So if you'd like to send a replay in to us, please send it to BIAworldofwarships, all lowercase, @gmail.com. Please include the replay file, post-game screenshots if you have them, a brief description of the battle, and then if you'd like myself or Spider to do the commentary, you can certainly request for that in your submission. So this replay that you're going to see here today is much like the Haragumo community replay that we had, I think it was last week, it might have been 2 weeks ago, where there were a lot of pretty good plays made and there were a lot of pretty bad plays made, and overall it still ended up being a good performance, but the game, sadly, ended up in a defeat right in the very last seconds. With this replay, we're going to have more of the same, but we'll see if the outcome is going to be a win or a loss. And there's going to be a lot of questionable decisions in this replay. However, there's also going to be plenty of good in this replay that I will definitely point out and showcase. And to be quite honest with you, playing a stock Dmitry Donskoi is kind of difficult. You can tell because it only has 40,200 hit points, whereas with the upgraded B-hull, you can get over 43,000 HP to work with. Also, since this is a stock hull, I would imagine that this has stock range. Now, of course, since it's tier 9, you can get the range modification in that 6th equipment slot to increase it, because the stock range on the Donskoi is just over 16 kilometers. However, his is 18.7. So I would imagine that he has the range mod on this guy on a stock ship. So, you know, the work's going to be a little cut out for him. The concealment is pretty good, 12.3 kilometers, fully spec'd. Compared to some of the other Soviet cruisers, it's kind of in the middle ground. The Chapayev is a bit better than it, and the Moskva and the Stalingrad are a little worse. But unfortunately, your radar range does not exceed your detectability range, so it can be sometimes a little bit tricky to be able to effectively use your radar without putting yourself in a position that's going to be difficult to extricate yourself from. The big thing about the Donskoi, of course, is that it has some very odd caliber guns, 180 millimeters. They're not as fast firing as the 152s, and they don't have as much alpha damage as the 203s or maybe the 220s on the Moskva, but they have a nice middle ground, and they certainly have some good shell velocity. You can see here is they are traveling downrange. The shot was a little bit too far in front, but you have excellent muzzle velocity with both the AP and the HE at 920 meters a second. So even at 16.4 kilometers, it's not going to take all that long for these shells to get over the corner of the island and hopefully impact the Neptune, who was turning just a little bit into the right, and that's exactly what happens. Is a pretty decent opening salvo on that guy, lands 5 penetrations and about 3,000 points of damage. So, you know, what I'm getting at with this, the Donskoi is a pretty good medium to long range cruiser that isn't able to use its radar as effectively as the Chapayev can. I know, obviously, that the Chapayev is at tier 8, so that's the ship that you come from, and it's kind of a shift in the paradigm, kind of like the Pensacola was when it was at tier 7 and the Cleveland was at tier 6. There was so many differences between the Cleveland and the Pensacola that it was almost a completely different ship. And quite honestly, playing this thing like a Chapayev is not really in your best interest, because the Moskva after it is even more different, and you want to be able to make that transition properly. So staying medium to long range, not really pushing in to use your radar too much, at least not in the early game like you can with an American or a British light cruiser and heavy cruiser. You want to stick to those medium to long ranges, utilize your guns, because again, the gunnery is very comfortable on the ship. Like I said, it has great muzzle velocity. The alpha damage is okay. The fire chance is pretty good, and the armor-piercing shells are actually really good on this ship. You can get citadels up near your maximum range on lightly armored cruisers, and you can get citadels on heavily armored cruisers at about, I don't know, 10 to 12 kilometers, relatively consistently. Anyway, for the purposes of the gameplay, his team has kind of pushed heavy over here towards the sea camp. There's still an enemy Kitakazi that is somewhere on the southern part of the capture space. However, they have done a good job thus far, his team that is, at being able to make their presence felt over here. Now, kind of what you're seeing going on here is a bit of a lemming train. There's one Utiloyan B, and there's a pair of battleships that are to the north northeast of the A cap for his team. But, you know, it's not really that big of a deal to have a lemming train going on. Now, I know that I probably triggered a lot of people out there watching this, but as long as that lemming train keeps pushing, and as long as that lemming train continues to keep the pace of the assault up, you know, that's something that's very important, because with a lemming train that does not do that, it can put yourself in a really bad situation as a team. He does get very lucky there, however, with the detonation there on the Kitakaze. He over-aimed quite a bit on that salvo at about 8.5 kilometers, but one of the shells managed to find, I guess, the magazine on that poor little destroyer. So he picks up his first kill with a devastating strike. A little bit lucky, but hey, that's RNGesus for you. Now, what you're going to see here, though, is some pretty bad stuff in the next couple of minutes from the team. And you can see that, you know, his guys, they're all stationed now just to the east of the sea cap. And what I would have liked to see is this push continue to go around the corner at full speed. You can see that the Miyoko here is not going to be living for much longer, because he's down to a third hit points and he is on fire with no chance to get undetected. And there's only 2 enemy battleships, a Bismarck and a Hood, that are in anywhere close to the vicinity of the sea cap. The Bismarck is actually getting ready to about face, and the Hood continues to move to the west. So right now, they're actually in a very good situation. And what needs to happen right now is that push needs to continue to make its way down around the island and then shift to the west, because, just for a little map tactics here on Sea of Fortune, this is a very important map to be able to play diagonally. Once you get A or once you get C, being able to get your guys into kind of like a half crescent or maybe a full crescent is what I meant to say, where, like, for instance, they have C, you got ships down on the G line, you got ships wrapping around to the north of C, and you kind of just put yourself in a position where if the enemy team wants to try and get on B, you got crossfires coming in. And it works the same way on the other side of the map at the A cap. And what's actually going to happen is that the enemy team is going to be able to do exactly that, and it's going to lead to a very large point gain that they're going to be able to accumulate here in about the next 5 minutes or so, and it's going to put you know, this game for Jags kind of on a knife's edge. So we'll see what happens there on that regard. There is an enemy Neptune that is taking some damage and some fire in the middle of the B cap, trying to get it back for the enemy team, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to get out of there. There is a friendly Atlanta that is getting some decent shots at that guy, and there's also some other friendly ships that are getting some good rounds downrange at him. So that Neptune is not going to be living for much longer. However, you could start to see the enemy team getting that crescent shape that I spoke of. You can see that they have ships south of B, they have ships just slightly west of B, and now you have a Missouri, a Mogami, and a Shores that are making the push to the northeast from their current position, and they're going to get a very nice crossfire potential here coming up. And, you know, for a Donskoi, when you're in a situation where there's lots of ships on either flank, it's a lot harder to maneuver around than it would be in other cruisers, because this is still a Soviet cruiser at the end of the day, and they all have, for the most part, at least starting at about tier 6, they all have very large turning radii, and they all have rather poor rudder shifts. So when you're trying to move around, you know, when you're trying to move around between 2 flanks that are shooting at you, it's a little bit difficult. So that's why staying at medium to long range is good, because even if you are somewhat caught in a crossfire, you're at those ranges where you're still going to be able to make your turn in time, or you're going to be able to do a much better job of getting out of harm's way before the shells and the enemy ships really do start to focus you down. And you can see here that he really has stayed at medium to long range throughout the course of this battle. The vast majority of his shots have come at about 13 plus kilometers, which is nice to see, because this is what the Donskoi really does excel at. The DPM is nothing fantastic. You can see right there, just over a 12-second reload, but it still gets the job done. And like I mentioned earlier, with the good fire chance, as he does get his second one of the game there on the Hood, you can deal a pretty good amount of damage in this ship. However, the enemy team now, 394 to 441. They have 2 of the 3 caps, and they have formed that nice line that is partly south of B and partly north of B. And it's at this point that a decision has to be made. Who is the priority group that needs to be liquidated? Now, like I said earlier, it would have been nice to see his friendly team push around and continue that momentum to the southwest of the sea cap, but they don't do it. So now the enemy team is getting points, and for the foreseeable future, they are guaranteed to have A and B getting points for their team. So all they need to do is get a couple of kills without losing any of their own, and this game is going to quickly get out of reach, which is something that you're going to actually see something very interesting later on in the gameplay from somebody on his team. But anyway, He's getting some shots downrange at the Mogami. It's quite apparent that the Mogami has pushed well out of position. He is within 10 kilometers of the friendly Amagi that's over there, Devil's Eyes, and he is not going to be long for this world. So he keeps the armor-piercing shot loaded here, and he's going to get some rounds downrange. And like I said, this Dmitry Donskoi AP is no joke. Against lightly armored cruisers, you can get citadels up to about your max range, and that is exactly what happens here. A nice double citadel and a couple other pens as he takes care, Jags does, of that tier 8 Japanese light cruiser. So a very nice shot right there at just about 15 kilometers. And now the enemy team only has 2 ships up there, the Shores and the Missouri. So at this point, Jags is going to make a good play. They realize with that enemy cruiser neutralized, those other 2 ships are now going to have to go a little bit more on the defensive. So now would be the opportune time to try and crush down on the enemy ships that are still in the vicinity of the B cap. And that's exactly what happens here, as Jags is going to turn around about face. You can also see the Blood Clown in the York is going to be moving in there as well to try to get some flanking shots. But unfortunately, the Atlanta and the Miyoko down there south of sea are going to make some pretty big mistakes as they come around the corner, full broadside to an enemy North Carolina. His friendly Atlanta gets blapped to oblivion, and then the friendly Miyoko in due course is going to eat some armor-piercing salvos in the broadside. So, not really sure what that push around the corner was, but it will result in the death of the Moss, as that is exactly what happens. So the enemy team now only has 1 destroyer left. And in the mid to late stages of the game, teams that have less destroyers are just inherently at a disadvantage, even if they have the cap lead, because if the enemy team tries to push on and get onto other caps, they're not going to really be able to effectively counter that as much as they could if they had an extra destroyer or 2 or 3. The enemy Missouri Dread 5 is now taking some pretty good fire here from the friendly Utiloi and also from Jags here. So he has to turn away. The Shores has to turn away. And now this is where his team realizes the situation that they're in, and they're going to continue to push in towards the B cap. Now, the enemy team also does make a bit of a positional error right here, as you're going to see the Hood is about 17.5 kilometers off of his starboard side, but then also the enemy Bismarck is going to move away, and he's spotted just to the north of the A cap. Now what this means is that if we do a little simple math, there's 4 enemy ships that are on the 4 line, and there's only 2 enemy ships that are over here next to the B cap, and that is of course the North Carolina and the Gajdamada. So what needs to happen right now is that Bismarck and the Amagi need to crush down on the B cap, and this game, even though it looks bad right now, is still not in any sort of dire straits, as Jags and his friends are going to go in there and see what they can do about it. And because the enemy team, for whatever reason, decided to shift more of their assets over to A, this is the perfect opportunity to be able to utilize this misplay that the enemy team is making right now to the good of their team. They are almost at 700 points, but like I said, this is not a really bad situation right now. They still have plenty of time. They still have a good opportunity to be able to wheel this one back. He's getting some more long-range shots as he's moving towards B, downrange at the Hood and the Bismarck, and again, being able to throw those shells out at these kind of ranges, just being able to affect this kind of area. I mean, you can see here in the C cap, he's able to hit almost the entirety of every single cap because he has the range to do so. And that's where, like I said, beating a dead horse here, Dmitry Donskoi, play at those medium to long ranges. I'd say, I don't know, 12, 13 kilometers on up is where you should really be focusing early to mid game, and then moving in to use your radar and whatnot mid to late game if you have the hit points is what you the best bet here. Now this play that's going to come up here for Jags is something that I am not a fan of at all, especially after I watched the replay the first time. I was really confused about the decisions that were made here, but we'll see if it screws him over. He's moving in to get some torpedoes on the enemy North Carolina. The Gajdamada is not spotted. He does have his radar ready to go, and right now the Gajdamada does detect him, and now he detects the Gajdamada. So, as he's going around the corner, the North Carolina is going to shoot his 2 forward guns at him. What he needs to do right now is turn hard to the right and utilize all of his firepower to bear on the enemy Gajdamada, because right now as he turns to the left, he's going to provide a full broadside for the Gajdamada's torpedoes and also put himself in a position where his AP would be able to wreck him pretty badly. But he doesn't. He decides to turn in towards the enemy North Carolina. He's going to drop his torpedoes, and it's just now, as the North Carolina is almost assuredly reloaded with his front guns that he's going to flash his entire broadside to the North Cal, and very luckily for him, he does not get deleted. He really needed to get the kill on the Gajdamada, and I'm not sure why he didn't turn full broadside to the right, while the North Carolina still had about a 20-second reload on his main battery guns, where he could have killed the destroyer and then hopefully gotten angled back enough when the North Carolina's front guns were inevitably reloaded again. But it doesn't matter. One torpedo slams home into the North Cal and another into the stern, and he gets the double strike and the Confederate as he picks up his 4th kill of the game on that Tier 8 American battleship. But Jags, if you do watch this back, I'm sure you will, I really would have liked you to, turn full broadside after the North Carolina shot his 2 forward guns at you. You know that that's about a 30-second reload. You would have had enough time to turn full broadside to the right, use your radar, and shoot at the enemy Gajdamada. I really think that that was the case, that was the play that should have been made. Obviously, this is 2020. I'm watching this from my nice high and mighty perspective, but I'm just saying I think that that is a much more beneficial play to make, because you wouldn't have had to worry so much about giving broadside to Gajdamada AP or potentially getting hit by torpedoes. Getting that destroyer out of the game, very, very important. Now, at this point, he does get the solo base cap, which is nice, and he did launch his torpedoes down the alleyway right there to try and dissuade enemy ships if they were moving in. He's down to 2,200 hit points, and he does have his heal going right now, so he's going to be able to get some of it back. Now, in the interceding amount of time, the enemy team only has 3 ships left, while his team has a total of 5, so they are in an advantage, and while they are losing 695 to 745, they are going to be able to win this game on points if nobody else dies. Now, what you can see here in chat is the Bismarck is telling everybody to go to the A cap. Why I do not agree with this? Well, it's for many reasons, but to keep it politically correct, they're going to win on points, regardless if the enemy team loses another ship or not. They don't need to get another kill. The Shores is going to go down here rather soon, but they don't need to get another kill. They have the 2-to-1 cap advantage, and when they do kill the Shores here in a few seconds, they are going to have the lead with 2 caps to 1. But then again, you can see that the Iowa also says get into A to stop them from getting points. And quite frankly, this is just people not just understanding the basics. That's not how domination works. You want to get the caps, you want to get the cap lead, and then when you get a kill to swing it in your favor, or even if you're only like 30 points down, you don't need to rush forward. You don't need to try and get a kill to win or to get your team's point total more than them when you're going to do it without even needing to engage. And you can see that the Bismarck is now charging nose on, bow on to the enemy Missouri. Now, another little small thing here is Jags has actually gotten so concerned with typing in chat that he pulls a Notzer and he runs into the island. He beaches himself. So, quite frankly, when I see things like that in chat, I don't even bother to respond, because clearly the Bismarck just has no idea what he's talking about. Clearly the Iowa has no idea what he's talking about. But now the Bismarck dies, and while they are losing the game, they're still going to win on points. But let's pretend that instead of there being 2.5 minutes left in the game, let's pretend that Bismarck died with only 10 seconds left because he still wanted to get on the A cap. Well, that would have resulted in a loss for Jags and his team. I'm just making that example. I'm just making that point so you guys can fully understand that when you have the 2-to-1 cap lead and you're within, 100 points, you don't need to get a kill. As long as there's enough time left, you just don't need to rush in and get a kill. Now, you can see that the Amagi's on 21,000 hit points. I'm still not sure why he's moving in there, considering that there is a hood to also shoot at him as well. But the Amagi does have some pretty decent armor, especially along the mid section and at the stern. So, okay, he's angled really nicely. He's not going to get deleted nose on like that. So I guess he's not really in that bad of a position, as he still does have a decent amount of hit points to work with. In the meantime, Jags does drop his torpedo salvo, his port side, against the enemy Missouri, which is a very good play. The Dmitry Donskoi actually has some decent torpedoes. They only have 8 kilometers of range, but in that mid to late stage of the game, as he picks up the Kraken with the torpedo strike, you can utilize them relatively effectively, as you do get 5 of them, and they do have a pretty decent amount of alpha strike per torpedo. Now, here at the end of the game, he's getting some armor-piercing broadsides into the side of the hood. A nice 6,500 damage shot right there. However, he's going to done goof right here, and it is going to cost him his life. He is slowly creeping forward to keep the island that's straight off on his port side in between him and the hood, but for some reason he decides to come to a stop, and now he is detected. He really should have kept creeping or trolling. For all you fishermen out there, he should have kept trolling at a quarter or even a half speed on the same direction that he was going, and he wouldn't have had any issues staying undetected from the hood. But now he does. He's down to 2,700 hit points. The hood's next salvo is going to come in, and right as the hood kills him, he does get the kill, and that ends the game here on Sea of Fortune. Alrighty guys, taking a look now at the post-battle results. 415,000 credits received and just over 10,000 total experience earned, and also 2,500 free XP. He picked up a Dev Strike, Confederate, Double Strike, and Kraken Unleashed, dealing 138,000 points of damage off of 171 shell hits and 3 torpedoes. He sank half of the enemy team, had 10 fires set, 3 citadels, and 1 solo base capture. Taking a look at the team score, he finished second on the squad with 2,438 base experience. The Utiloi also doing some work with 3 kills and 2545 of his own. So between the two of them, they killed 9 enemy ships and had almost 5,000 base XP. Taking a look at the detailed report, 98k dealt with the main battery, 67 with the HE, and 30 with the armor piercing. Another 23,000 damage dealt with the torpedoes, and another 16,000 dealt with the fires that were set. So overall, a pretty good spread on the damage dealt. You can't always count on being able to utilize Donskoi torpedoes, but they are good enough that in the mid to late stages, you can utilize them in mid to close range combat, and he certainly was able to in this replay. So, Jax, thanks for sending this one in. I did enjoy watching it. I hope I wasn't too harsh on some of the mistakes that I felt that you made, but also I was quick to point out some of the good things that you were doing. And it was nice to see that for the most part, from the early part to the mid game, you were staying at those medium to long ranges. You were really keeping a good arm's distance between you and the enemy team, and you didn't throw away your hit points needlessly at the start of the battle like you see so many cruiser players doing. So that right there was some very good stuff, and again, thank you for sending in the replay. So with that being said, this is Noodle Boy for BIA World of Warships signing off. Please consider giving the video a like, subscribing to the channel, commenting on our videos, sharing it with your friends. Thank you guys so much for the support that you give us and all that you do for the channel, and have a great day.